My name is Lance Brown, and today I will be discussing the topic of the famous artist Rembrandt Harmenszoon van Rijn. Um, he is an influential artist throughout history and has been for some time. And of all the historical artists, Rembrandt is one of the most influential of his time. Rembrandt Harmenszoon van Rijn was a Dutch Golden Age painter. He is considered one of the greatest artists in the history of art and is remembered for his use of four different mediums to create his work, printmaking being his most prominent, and his others are drawing, etching, and painting. Rembrandt was most famous for his work created through printmaking and his ability to create intense and captivating works of art. I have been captivated and intrigued by art ever since I took my first class in high school, and I have taken 6 individual classes since high school and college level, and have taken a class solely regarding the study of artists and their work. First, I will discuss who Rembrandt was and his background. Second, I will discuss the various techniques that Rembrandt used. And lastly, I will discuss one of the most famous paintings that has been stolen and is still missing to this day. Rembrandt Harmenszoon van Rijn is considered one of the most influential artists of his time. Rembrandt was an artist active in the Dutch Baroque period. Rembrandt was born July 15th, 1606 in Leiden, Netherlands, and he died October 4th, 1669 in Amsterdam. Rembrandt was not just a painter and would have been famous regardless due to his brilliance as a teacher and a printmaker. He was a part of the Baroque art movement that was moving through Europe in the early 17th century to the late 18th century and is emphasized in dramatic, exaggerated motion and clear, easily interpreted detail. Rembrandt started his studies at the young age of 10. Rembrandt entered a Latin school at his hometown of Leiden, where he spent time studying classical, biblical works and oratory, and he left soon after to begin practicing art. He quickly learned how to create landscape and architectural paintings and how to create complex scenes in his work. He was exceptionally good at rendering realism in his painting, which is obviously prominent in his work. He focused heavily on realism. And given his use of dark colors and lighting in his work, Rembrandt was considered to prefer ugliness to beauty. Rembrandt was a fortunate artist for his time, and he gained fame fast. Rembrandt grew popular for his historic and biblical paintings and etchings. He was also popular for creating and selling portraits and self-portraits alike. Rembrandt died, however, very poor and was considered to be a misunderstood person, and by the time he died, it was evident that his art style of realism had been smothered by the style of classicalism. Artists in the early 18th century of Germany and Venice, however, adopted Rembrandt's style of realism, and the style of realism was considered a forerunner for the Romantic movement. This is when Rembrandt gained his nobility as one of the greatest figures in history. Now that I've discussed who Rembrandt was, I will move forward by going more in depth about the techniques and style of Rembrandt's works and his most notable pieces of art. Rembrandt was skilled in using various techniques when creating his art. He created the impasto technique. The impasto technique was one in which thick paint would protrude outward from the surface of the painting, making it look 3D. This technique sounds simple. Before his time, Rembrandt was essentially creating a paradox in the art community just by creating a more perceptible view of the paints on the canvas. Thanks to the ESFR, or the European Synchrotron Radiation Facility, on January 14th, 2019, a team of scientists at Delft University of Technology finally figured out how he accomplished this technique. Rembrandt was fond of using light and shadow in almost all of his paintings. The technique for using light and shadow in painting is known as chiaroscuro. It was believed that he used this kind of style in his paintings because he focused often on the thought of life and death, and he was known for creating more classical and biblical style paintings. The biblical paintings he did make did not necessarily focus on the joys of life and instead told stories of tragedy and sorrow. For example, the abduction of Europa, 1632. Another reason Rembrandt used the style of chiaroscuro was due to his ability to use other techniques like impasto and make the painting appear more realistic and lively with the way he could make them look 3D and get the dark shadows and rough edges he desired in his work. Rembrandt's most famous work of art, The Militia Company of Frans Bonning-Sonck, 1642, which is this painting right here. This painting became Rembrandt's most famous piece because of his use of technique of chiaroscuro. Due to its dark nature, critics believe this painting to be a night scene because it was so dimmed and the use of shadow made it look very deceiving. And as I just showed you, even with all of the lighting, it does still appear to be a very dark painting. This painting was also a lost piece of Rembrandt's for some time, and when it was discovered, it was very dusty and a lot of the brighter colors had been dimmed. It wasn't until it was clean that it was very recognizable as a scene in broad daylight. So even with the dark shadows, it was very, dusty. It wasn't clean. The paints were kind of shaded out. It did look like a night scene, but once it was clean, you could see the light on him is actually the sunshine bearing in. And no one knows if this painting resembles a real party of musketeers, but it's believed to be another biblical reference of some kind. Now that I've discussed some of Rembrandt's most prominent techniques, I will talk about one of his works that has been stolen and is still missing to this day, which is The Storm on the Sea of Galilee, 1633. And that is this painting here. So what did the painting depict? This painting was one of Rembrandt's most obvious biblical pieces, and it depicts Christ's disciples struggling against the storm on the sea. It was also Rembrandt's only seascape painting that he created. This painting also grew attention due to Rembrandt's self-involvement in the painting, and he can be seen looking directly at the viewer. So, if I can get it right, Rembrandt is right here, and he is the only one on the ship and in the painting that is looking at the viewer. Despite the nature of the painting, it was meant to be viewed as a beautiful story of Christ's disciples being guided by Christ himself as they sail the treacherous seas. You can see the message of this by seeing the single ray of light that shines only on the ship. And as I was saying with chiaroscuro, Rembrandt's style of using light and shadow, the rest of the painting appears very dark and shaded, but the light shining in gives a clear view of the ship itself. Rembrandt also included Christ himself in the painting, and he can be seen on the right as the only member of the ship remaining calm. So he is seen right here, very dark. It is a very dark painting. Can't tell if you can really see that very well right there. And then when was the painting stolen? A Storm on the Sea of Galilee was one of the 13 stolen masterpieces from the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston on March 19th, 1990. The theft is considered one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in the world and was carried out by two men who were posing as police officers responding to a security threat. The two men proceeded into the building and ended up restraining all present staff members and began to steal the 13 different masterpieces, Storm on the Sea being one of those. After the paintings had been stolen, there was no evidence of any auctioning or whereabouts of the painting, and there is still no lead to this day. Some possible involvements. One of the most accepted theories is that the painting was stolen by local mobsters and sold on the black market. In 2019, authorities searched the house of a former mobster, Robert Gentile, and found a list of stolen Gardner art pieces with prices listed, but there was no indication of names or buy confirmation, leading officers to believe that there was no actual auction of the stolen paintings. The former involvement of Robert Gentile was denied, however, and he claimed to have been framed by a fellow mobster in order to divert attention. The investigation was declared closed, and despite possible mobster involvement, it is believed that the paintings have been hidden and they will not be found. Today, I've discussed who Rembrandt was and what his background looked like. Second, I discussed the various techniques Rembrandt used when creating his work. And finally, I discussed the theft of one of his masterpieces. Of all the historical artists in the world, Rembrandt is one of the most influential of his time. In conclusion, of all the artists in the world, Rembrandt Harmenszoon van Rijn remains one of the most influential throughout history, and his ability to use light and shadow in his work truly supports this. His creation of the impasto technique also shows that he was revolutionary when it came to his work, and he was looked to for inspiration by many artists ahead of his time.